Okay. Hey, Jordan.
Jordan, all right. Yeah, in the audience. But did you get yourself dinner? Okay.
I am calling to order the February 17th BOSAC meeting. So we'll do roll call.
Jay Beckerman.
Present.
Kristen Joyce.
Here.
Eli Rochelle.
Here.
Chris Tennell.
Here.
Bobby Zanka. Okay, and David Rossi and Matt Powers are absent tonight.
And just a reminder for us to use our microphones because it does help Alex with the minutes.
Oh, yes.
So we'll try to be good about that
Where
and
Alex
using.
needs.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
here for you, Alex. Yes, of course.
Really good minutes, by the way.
All right, speaking of minutes, any issues with the January 27th minutes? No, no, we're good. I move to approve the January 27th, 2025 meeting minutes.
I second.
Great. Okay, agenda, any issues there? Nope. Okay. Public comment? Hi, public, welcome. Any comments, non-agenda related? Okay, Jeffrey, nothing?
Yeah, come on.
Okay, we're happy to have you, all of you. All right, so staff summary, here we are.
Yeah, couple updates. One is that thanks to Jordan, the RFP for the Lorium parking lot relocation project was issued, I think today. Is that right, Jordan? On Friday. So check out the county website for more details on that, but that's moving along and we hope to have the McCain design RFP issued hopefully later this week, but that's in final draft stages. Want to make sure and give an opportunity for any additional Breck Stables comments. You saw ours in the staff summary. Please let us know if you have others. And then Mark was going to expand on the fee in lieu BGV transfer.
Quick question about the Breck Stables. One of the things that I think was being discussed a lot was Beaver Run's, the road up to Breck Stables going through Beaver Run's property and trying to find an alternate for that. Was that ever discussed in any of the conversations being held?
Not that we've been a part of. There's a plan to try to limit roadside parking beyond the Beaver Run parking lot. And I think the ski area and the Beaver Run Resort are gonna work to rope or fence off the sides of the road going uphill until maybe the bottom of the super connect to restrict parking and then also gate the road downstream to the Maggie. And that'll just be for operational access. So there'll be that restriction because I think a lot of people were skipping the pay part of the Beaver Run parking and parking on the side of the road, but that was causing resource damage and congestion. And so that's changing, but nothing else as part of this.
I had another stables question. Can you explain a little bit more about the overlap that they were talking about, you guys were talking about between the horse trails and the foot trails and the Peak 10 project? And if there's like what that all entails, if there's expansion for foot only, for horse only?
Okay, so currently, the stables summer operation uses some trails that are also open to pedestrian and bike traffic. And so there have been some user conflicts there that we've, made aware of, and I just have happened. One of those is Flapjack. So that's the little ski trail that goes from the bottom of the Falcon up to the south side of Peak 10. And the horse rides go up there. And then another one is Wanderer, is a ski area, single track bike trail, cross country trail, and that crosses some of the horse ride trails, but they don't share the trail. The whole goal of the Peak 10 Trails project, the Forest Service is leading, is to get a full inventory of all the trails in the area and then figure out what's used for what and come up with, okay, here's what it is now. here's what we think we should change it to reduce conflict and resource impact. So some of these trails could go away or the use restrictions may change. And that's part of the goal of the Peak 10 Trails project is to analyze everything and figure out what can work cohesively.
Say so in that at all, or is that because it's Forest Service land that's there to?
Let's say so. That'll be equivalent to the, on a smaller scale, the Frisco Backyard Project, where there's a bunch of public comment periods. But I think if, in the stage now, it's data information gathering, and then it'll be come up with a proposed plan and then put it out for multiple rounds of public comment, and we'll be able to chime in then.
Oh, good, thank you.
Oh, just a note, Matt Powers is on.
Oh, great.
Just wanted to let everyone know. Mark, did
She's
you
driving.
want to speak to the fee and lieu? Just.
Well, I
don't
thought I'd
s-
just maybe add a little bit to what was in the memo. So our subdivision regulations that the town has require whenever there's a new subdivision on land that wasn't previously subdivided, that we get a 10% dedication, or we can get a fee in lieu if the land's not appropriate for public use. And so that's essentially what we did on this. We don't hardly ever have these come up, but Breck Grand Vacations as part of the whole development agreement, this parcel 6, 14 lots, I don't know, do you have the
packet?
can you show that would be helpful, Tony. You just take a look at that for a second.
Where is this?
So this is up on the ski area, Kristen, and it's, do you know where Timber Trail is?
Mm-hmm.
It's adjacent to that.
Oh.
So if you go down scroll down, Tony, a little lower. Right, there it is.
Okay.
Okay, so if you see where number 6 is, it's about a 13-acre parcel. And it's immediately adjacent to Timber Trail subdivision, which is obviously one of our most high-end subdivisions in the town. And it's also adjacent to the ski area on kind of the, I guess, west and southwest. And then also to that's the ski maintenance facility there where all the cats go out. So anyway, as part of this overall development agreement that was approved last year, which Jay was involved with the town council, with BGV, this was approved to have 14 lots on it. And like I say, we rarely have these kind of things that come in anymore. I mean, obviously we had a lot of subdivision of the islands and stuff like that years ago, but something like this is very rare that it happens anymore. But because of that requirement, they have to either provide land or in this case, a fee in lieu. So we actually spent the last 8 months working through where we got an appraisal and said, we think the value of the land before it's subdivided, there's still a value based on the density that's bestowed upon it, 14 units. You know, had an appraiser look at it. BGB had another appraisal done to kind of counter that. And we basically, the council has been in negotiation with BGV for a number of months. And finally last Tuesday, there was a settlement reached between the council and BGB on that. And so basically what it's resulting in is $2 million that will be coming to be used for, it says, open space and park purposes. So still to be determined, but I'm assuming BOSAC's going to be playing a big role in that in terms of recommendations for how that money is spent, but we would need to use it for acquisition purposes. And the dollars themselves will have to come by January 1st, 2018.
28?
2028, excuse me, 28 at the latest. But if 8 of the 14 lots are sold, it has to come at that point. So it can come earlier. Let's see, the first 2 lots is, they have to give a certain percentage of the value of the first 2 lots and then a different percentage of the value of the next 5. But anyway, at the latest, this would be 2018.
You're stuck on 18.
28.
We all want to go back.
Yeah, so that's just a little more information. Be glad to answer any more questions.
Is there a time limit for when, is there a time limit for, so it has to go to acquisition, but can we sit on that money for a long time or?
That's a real good question. We have 7 years from the time we receive the money to spend it.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Mark
so
that-
we'll want to earmark that money and track it.
Okay.
And obviously, we want to make it a priority to purchase property, open space or parkland.
So it can be used for parkland and
Yeah.
town limits too.
Yes. So I mean, and as you know, there have been times in the past where the council's asked for participation in that. So you probably shouldn't necessarily expect that it would be 100% out of open space, but that's still to be determined in discussions with the council. But anyway, yeah, so we will want to just track that and make sure we're making an emphasis on spending that money. So I don't think should be a problem given our past history, but yeah, but that would be a priority for, so it's a great windfall for the program.
What were you gonna say, Tony? Oh,
Clarify this, so that was great. Great,
okay.
Mark. Thank you for all that work too. It's great.
Yeah, well, there was a bunch of us involved, so, yeah.
I have one more question. I don't know. I'm feeling really chatty tonight. Can you give an example of one of the more obvious ones when land, what, instead of a fee in lieu, land was given?
Yeah,
What that looks
Highlands,
like?
the Highlands, they met all their requirements by designating open space tracks. For example, the golf course, that's all considered open space. But then there was a bunch of other tracks that were associated with the Highlands as well.
Huh.
They're just Highlands open space tracks. I have one above my house in Silver Shekel. It's, I don't know, it's a half acre and there's a little kiosk they built up there on Highlands Drive. So there's, yeah, so there's a bunch of that was done. They met 100% of their requirement. Yeah.
Looms, easements, like, would that be an example of that?
That's a good question. I don't, it might have been part of the, yeah, it was definitely part of the requirements for the subdivision.
Mm.
Whether it met that threshold, whatever they provided exceeded the 10%. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's helpful.
Anything else on staff summary? Okay, we'll do state of the open space.
Okay. Great, thanks, Tony. Okay, State of the Open Space 2024. A couple preambles here. First, thanks to Tony and Alex and Joel. This was a big collaborative effort for sure. And also, as you know, I didn't start in this role till halfway into 2024 on July 1st. So a lot of the accomplishments covered here are credit to those guys. And I was sitting where you were sitting. But here we go. So we'll just overview of the program, how it began, its mission, and then we're framing this just like it was done last year, using our master plan to sort of highlight the strategic goals and dig into each of them. Love this picture. Hopefully you guys were able to see this in the packet, but 2003-ish iteration, BOSAC, and I wish Dave Rossi were here to react to it.
Few of us. and-
Former self. So probably all familiar, but in 96, tax initiative was placed on the ballot that passed, dedicating 0.5% of sales tax revenue to open space.
Yeah.
And that was founded, or that went into effect in 1997, founding the program. And the mission, which our master plan spells out, is to preserve lands that define and enhance the unique mountain character of the town of Breckenridge with the objective of maintaining our community's quality of life for present and future generations. And then these are the strategic goals of the master plan, which we adopted 2023, 2 years ago. And I think tonight will be a good exercise to see how to sort of test this utility. I think that's where it can really serve us going forward, is using that to consider future acquisitions or management decisions. At a glance, began in 1997, our running tally of money spent towards acquisition for open space preservation is over 34 million. We're now over 5,200 acres and 70 miles of trails. Pretty amazing numbers. This year's budget was just over 8.5 million. And 90% of the time is devoted to trail maintenance. We'll touch on this more, but I just think it's important to remember, you know, we built some new trails, did some exciting stuff, but with 70 miles of trails, maintenance is going to be the main focus. A bunch more invasive weed pilling this year, led by volunteer efforts and coordinated by staff, 650. A lot of hazardous trees removed from the trail corridors. Preventative maintenance, really. I'm sorry, I meant to mention, this can be a discussion. Feel free to chime in with questions or comments. I don't want to get to slide 22 and we go back to slide 2. We can just talk about it. Okay, 8 volunteer events, 136 volunteers, 234 on a hike. And then this is a good one. Tony led the reestablishment of our Adopt a Trail program, and the NRO focused on cleaning up the Blue River corridor between the Riverwalk and the gondola. And so that's neat to bring that back, and hopefully we can expand upon that. Our budget for last year, again, it's just over 8.5 million. Of course, a huge chunk of that was land acquisitions, and we'll get into those more in a subsequent slide. But these other categories, just want to touch on them. We had probably more work done by contractors and professional and contracted services than is typical. Tony usually coordinates a lot of different contracts at once, and this year was a especially high level. We had sort of one-offs like the Bridge Brothers and Merge and Civic Brand helping us with the website, and also lumped into that sum are all the services hired by the Wellington treatment plant to operate. Personnel stay pretty similar. I know Ann had been gone for a couple months, and then we should be back to regular levels. And in materials and supplies, that also includes the chemicals needed by the Wellington treatment plant. And one other distinction is that grants aren't just CFI and FDRD. As part of our newer agreements to support the Town of Blue Rivers open space program, we're not actually landowners of those properties. We contributed money to support their open space preservation program and have the property secured by the IGAs. But technically those are just grants and not ownership. So they fall under this category where we hadn't used that before.
Do you know, is it Tetra Tech doing the work on the Wellington?
Yes,
Do you know where all that is?
that's a grant. I believe that, Jordan, correct me if I'm wrong, that's an EPA grant, CDPHE and EPA
Oh, okay.
funded grant to pay Tetra Tech to do that work.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. Okay, acquisitions. So this was a pretty big year, but you can see the running total on the right side here. 2005 stands out. That was the B&B claims purchase. And then, as I mentioned, the Town of Blue River, pretty exciting that we're now able to partner with them. And this is the first time that we've been able to work with them to preserve some lands for open space and public access and try to establish that Blue River Trail further south. And hopefully it's a start of more to come. As you can see from this little bar graph, more of our purchases are out of town. Makes sense. There's fewer opportunities in town, more expensive. I think that trend will continue. Oh gosh, hold on. Okay, we're back on track. Okay, so this is an overview of what we purchased this year. I think this map's pretty amazing. Thanks to Brad La Rochelle for his expertise. But it, first of all, it's striking, right? How little property we bought this year, considering we spent a lot of money and we put a lot of work and effort into it. But this is roughly the upper Blue Basin, Hoosier Pass to Farmer's Corner. It's a little bit zoomed in. And this line here is the town of Breck boundary. And so here are the purchases that we bought just outside the town of Breck, the Little Daisy and Lizzie Load. And of course, those came at a higher price tag. And then up here are Humbug claims. And then over here is Jackpot. And one exciting detail on Jackpot is that it needs to be made official, but BOCC has on their agenda to consent to contributing 40% towards that purchase. So assuming they approve as expected, they will have partnered with that one as well. And then you have these little Blue River guys here, which I think are so helpful. It gives you a sense of the Blue River Trail. It really goes from here all the way down to Fredonia down here. So those are key pieces of that puzzle. And then there's the Aspen Springs lot at the bottom at the Quandary Trailhead. And on the right side, you can just see a table just showing how much each costs. And these are total property purchase price. They don't reflect the breakdown between us and Blue River and Summit County. Here is everything that we manage jointly with the county or just the town and now with Blue River. And again, more out of town than in town. And I think maybe that's where our opportunities in the future will lie more frequently, is preserving space in the upper Blue and not as much in the town corridor. But it doesn't look as sparse. Which trail is this?
Mineral Hill.
Thank you, Nikki. That was the trivia for tonight. Maybe there's another one.
Quick.
Okay, trail maintenance, as I mentioned, 90% of that is actually working on the existing trails, drainage and erosion and tread work, removing all those trees. And so Joel and the crew spend most of their time doing that. It's an extensive network and they maintain a very high standard. So I think that's where our efforts need to continue to focus. But this year we did build some new trails, which we hadn't in a few years. And Ellie's Features was the big one, but also an all persons trail, the Keystone Drill, all persons, the BOEC around the Griffith Lodge at the BOEC. And then Toad Alley, Nightmare, and Mountain Pride reroutes. Toad Alley being the longest of those reroutes. Friends of Breck Trails preparation, that takes some coordination and prep and tool maintenance. And then just data collection, I think that's important piece of the puzzle. Collecting data on what we're doing, where we're doing it, and then our camera and trail counter maintenance. Some of the bigger field projects. Look at this guy, Jeffrey. Joel's maintaining the winter grooming up out of the Peabody Trailhead above Gold Run Nordic Center. Really popular free amenity, and he's trying to teach us how to do it. It's going to be big shoes to fill when he's gone, but it's been neat to spend some time out there and see how many different types of users really appreciate that. It's a cool network that we're able to provide, and Joel's the one doing the bulk of that work. Ellie's Features, exciting new trail, 8,500 feet, cool new connection. As you know, finished last summer, and it'll be neat to have a full season with it and watch how user patterns kind of change. The Toad Alley reroute, that, as you remember, all our discussions in BOSAC, what to do about Cucumber Gulch and balance recreation with conservation. And I thought that was a great outcome. Rerouting that northern edge of the trail, pushing it west out of the wetlands and further towards the perimeter of the gulch. And our staff helped with that. And then Tony Boone contracted a lot of the actual new trail construction. And then just as the season wound up working out, lots of bridges and boardwalks just needing repair or replacement across the network. Toad Alley, a big one. This one in the top left picture is 4 o'clock trail right by the Sawmill Reservoir. And it was, all kinds of broken planks as you walk or right across it. It just needed repair. So a lot of attention put to those. I know we saw this picture during Joel's report and Tony took it, but I just think it deserved inclusion again. Just amazing. I don't know if you can make out in the distance. I think that's a woman with a walker and a small child next to her. And then you have, now it's crusher fines. We retrofitted the trail to make it all persons friendly in the entrance route, and then pull off sections. And here you have, I think, a gentleman in a mechanized wheelchair holding the hand of presumably his woman partner, and then a gentleman with a crutch and a woman with a dog on a leash, all using this Trollstigen trail. It's pretty cool. So some of the projects were this Trollstigen retrofit, pulled out a bunch of the flagstone, installed crusher fines and boardwalks and handrails and little bumpers, full height railing so that wheelchairs wouldn't slide, or, move off the trail also. So little lower bumper rails at a lower height to make that all persons accessible. And that BOEC trail, I don't know if you've been able to see it in person, but that you can now park at the BOEC at the Griffith Lodge and access the Sawmill Reservoir and All Persons Trail. And that's a pretty cool access that wasn't available to people with mobility, challenges. Also at the Breck Nordic Center, right by the OB Joyful Lodge, is a new All Persons Trail at that entrance point. Takes you to that avian overlook site into the gulch, and then finishing the Riling Dredge with the bridge bump outs and the parking. You've seen these before. Just began work with Merge last summer, and we'll be continuing this summer with get the final deliverables we'll discuss in April, and talk about piloting this program in Illinois Creek. But another big project that I think very much ties into access and inclusion, and we're going to I put the example of the All Persons Trail nutrition label style sign on here with different slope angles and more specifics than maybe a regular trail would warrant. And then bilingual messaging will be a part of this too. And then environmental education, mostly led by our naturalists. So we had Ella and Lauren this summer, and they did a tremendous job guiding hikes, but also kind of expanding their repertoire to, they had foraging themed hikes with berries and medicines and things, and they had booths, interpretive booths, and would answer questions, and we were able to put them they went to Aspen Alley and busy fall season days, and just being trail ambassadors as well as just guiding hikes and having a presence in the Gulch more than anywhere else. Leave no trace. There's Jordan. So staff did this earlier in 2024, and they trained up as it's a 2-day instructor training, so they can help share this message. And I feel like this really ties into our environmental education and etiquette messaging, things like dispose of your waste and be considerate of others and respect wildlife, and just basic tenets that we want to broadcast as widely as we can. So the BTO is helping with this. We want to incorporate it in our signage plan and on our website. We have Rec Center youth camp coordinator staff attended this training. And so it really seems like a good avenue to help spread this message. And we'll be applying for the gold standard designation this fall. And that's basically measuring how many communications we had, and direct and indirect messaging. And we hope to be able to achieve that standard. The website launched last June. Another that came out of the master plan, and it's pretty exciting new tool. I'm not sure how much you guys have played on there, but it has an interactive calendar where we can direct people to sign up for FOBT events and guided hikes and see what's coming. It has a trails condition page. In the winter, we can update grooming, and in the spring and fall, when trails are drying out or getting wet, that can be the clearinghouse for what's dry enough to keep using or stop using. And the trail map is excellent. You can filter it by use, hikers only or family friendly or all persons or biking. And you can also report trail issues. So that's a great way for us to find out where there's a tree down or a washout or something, and anyone in the public can do that. As well as it's a document library as well. So that's where a master plan is available to the public.
Have people used that so far?
Do people use it?
Have they been?
The report of trail condition?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Okay.
only a little bit, some, but I think that's part of this is this new program. People also are getting used to going to our website for signing up for a guided hike or FOBT event where they used to go to the rec center. So we need to sort of get that message out there that this is where we want people to go to sign up or to report a condition or to find out trail conditions, or maybe to find out where you could ride an e-bike. We have a map for that too. Those kinds of things are all available here.
Yeah.
Is it linked to the Be Like Breck app at all? I mean.
Alex, do we know that?
We actually,
Please.
I met with BTO last week to do that. We're gonna try to sync up both the Be Like Breck app to our website, and so that we have that mirroring kind of messaging and locations for people to find hikes and stuff. So
Yeah, I think that would be a good way. People get used to that one. It'll
Yeah,
take
we're
us to ours.
hoping to share all of our volunteer events and guided hikes on their calendar as well, and just have both the calendars and the maps all sync up. I
Yep.
think we had 3 reports using that tool in 2024, and it was only live for about 5 or 6 months. So to Duke's point, we'll try to get that messaging out. That's a great way to let us know.
Alex, are you watching the analytics of the website? Like, are you looking at?
Yeah, we do have that ability. And it definitely, we got a lot more ticks as we improved the website throughout the summer. I think around August and September, I think September we had the most hits so far.
Nice.
And it, lulls a little bit in the winter time, but with it all set up and ready for 2025, I think we'll have some good numbers this year.
Cool. Thanks.
FOBT, another successful season. This is from a couple years ago on Mineral Hill. Here's some of the numbers. 8 events, worked on 9 different trails, contributed to some of the buck and rail fencing. They didn't do all 5,000 feet, but a lot of buck and rail fencing happened this summer, and Friends of Breck Trails helped with that. But the biggest project was Ellie's Features, which was a big success. And as you know, this program is just so valuable. I mean, you get some trail work done, but really people are making connection to the community and the actual trails and getting an appreciation for what goes into it and taking some ownership. And I think it's just a really, really cool program that Tony and Joel have established.
Is there gonna be a way, I've had a couple people ask if they can do, like with their organization, do a trail day. And I know you're talking about adopt a trail too, so that might also be an opportunity, but is that also, like, how would people find out about doing that if their company wanted to do something? Or do you want them to?
No, yeah, we do. I think that's great. And we already offer that, but
Yeah.
we haven't really advertised it. It's more of a group reaches out to the BTO or somebody, and they contact us. And, we've got a group of 10 or 15, 20 folks, and we love those. It's all about timing and if we have the right project
Mhm.
for them. But we're definitely open to that.
And that would be like separate from an actual Friends of Breck Trail.
Yeah, like a community involvement, community give back, kind
Yeah.
of thing like that.
Okay.
Yep.
What does it take to adopt a trail?
So we just started the program this summer. NRO signed a contract, and I think we came down to maybe 2 days a month where they would have to come out and volunteer and clean up. And we kind of dictated the time of what was good for them between like June to September, when they were here and involved, and they committed to those 2-day cleanups. And then they would reach out to Open Space and Parks and be like, we've got 12 people signed up for this particular day. And then we would, set up pickers and garbage bags and then pick them up after that. So that's kind of like the basis of the Adopt a Trail program.
And is it meant more for like organizations like the NRO or companies? It's not really meant for like a family could adopt a trail.
I
Wouldn't be
think
as big
I think it could be, I think that we're trying to be pretty basic and simple with the adopt a trail or adopt a rec path, where it's, we're not looking at going out and doing maintenance or doing on your own. It's kind of just a simple, maybe a little invasive weed removal or simple garbage cleanup, something like that. So, if a family wanted to adopt a section of the rec path and committed to doing it 2 days a month, then I think we would be open to that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, stewardship, start with Cucumber Gulch, which often referred to as the crown jewel. Ecometrics will be presenting their annual report next month, so we can really dig into that. But some of the data from this year, let's see, beaver observations were down a bit. One concern is reed canary grass. Another is that they just moved lower and spent their time and built their lodges lower in the gulch where we could observe them. But the number of observations decreased. And let's see, it wasn't a year for avian bird monitoring. That's an every other year cycle, and we'll continue that next summer. We are going to add the bioacoustics monitoring system as well to add to that. And then wildlife camera and trail counter detection, continued that. We have 9 cameras within the preserve, and they still picked up less wildlife than in 2023. But we'll continue to monitor using wildlife cameras and trail counters. So, yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
When it comes to Cucumber Gulch and Toad Alley, we spoke in that community meeting about possibly discussing minimization efforts. Is that still something that's on the table, or are we looking to get more data first before we look at minimizing impacts further than what's already in place?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it certainly could be on the table. I guess, it'd be nice to collect data and see if the reroute and some of our new signage and, see if behavior changes a bit, or see how it evolves with the new access from the Nordic Center is going to have a kiosk, and that's the All Persons Trail. And then the access at the Peaks Trailhead side of Toad Alley moved a little bit over, and it's more better defined, I'd say, with new buck and rail on the side where it used to be. And then we like where the reroute is just in terms of impact. So I would say that could always be up for discussion, but given the new changes, it might be nice to collect some new data and see how people are using it and see what the naturalists are observing. Okay, so some of our land management practices, forest health. So we're all familiar with that at this point, but trying to create some fuel breaks and limit wildfire impacts. And then after we cut these fuel breaks, the piles cure for a couple of years, and then we burn them. And that happened at Bacon Lode in the fall, and Peabody Placer is another recent project. And as you know, we just took care of Airport Road last week. Weed control continues, pulling stuff manually, contracting some of the work. We do a lot of, we have other management tools. Protective fencing is a big one, where we replaced and added to Cucumber Gulch fencing on the perimeter and also interior, beefed up some of the fencing. So hopefully that will help as well. And then continuing to work with the county on the Swan River restoration, and then on the Kane property and the Blue River restoration there. Breck history. Their big project was the Keystone Drill and the structure. And this trail this photograph doesn't have it, but there is a little All Persons Trail now that accesses that from the parking lot, which is another nice feature. And then another thing Breck history did in 2024 was they conducted an inventory of all the structures on Dry Gulch to try to discern what's historical and what's newer, and maybe help inform future management decisions. Okay, visitor use management. So this seems like we collected a lot of data in 2024, and I think this is going to be increased emphasis going forward. As we get busier and have more just more users, I think we want to do everything we can to collect as much data to make our decisions data driven and well informed. And so I think that's going to be a a bigger investment in cameras and trail counters and user studies and maintenance. You know, these things are finicky. If you don't check them often enough, they may have been down for a period of time and you had no idea. So just investing more into this so we can have more data and make more, you know, it'd be nice to have trail counters that measure different uses, for example, mountain bikers versus hikers on Slalom and Aspen Alley, just to name two right off the bat that we would like to install, and maybe wildlife cameras in places we want to build trails and we want to know if there's wildlife there. We want to just be increasing this. So these are trail counts at B&B and Sally Barber, North Sally Barber trailheads. And bear in mind, these are just counters. So anytime anything goes past it, a dog or a person or I don't know, anything, any creature, it will trigger it. And so if in the case of B&B, where people are often parking at B&B and going in and out, that's going to be 2 ticks. And potentially at B&B, if somebody's parking and their dog runs around for 20 minutes, that could be 30 ticks. You don't know. But what is important is that these numbers are relative to themselves in previous years. These counters are in the same places using the same technologies. And so you can see the COVID spike for each of these. And then sort of dips down. Sally Barber seemed to level off this year, and B&B went down. And I don't have a great answer for that. One theory that we were kicking around, you can see it went down about 50, maybe a little more in winter use at the B&B trailhead versus 2023. One piece of that contributing factor could be just the country boy. I don't know if it's a formal easement, but the pastor, I think, people that are coming up from the Wellington Trail are no longer going to French Gulch Road and through the B&B trailhead parking lot and triggering that counter. They're just getting right into B&B through Country Boy Mine. So I think that does decrease those numbers. I'm not sure if it to the extent that they've gone down. So something to watch there. And then this was a user study. I'd like to do more of these, maybe one in the summer. They're labor intensive because it's a wildlife camera, just taking pictures of users and staff sitting down and writing down, identifying this person, you don't count them twice, and writing down whether they were hiking or running something on foot or cross-country skiing or fat biking or alpine skiing or split boarding. Those are both alpine in this category. And then snowshoeing. And a good reminder from this study, this is on those 6 trails listed, is that almost half our users are hikers. And important to remember, you know, it's important to consider all these other kinds of uses, and we spend a lot of time doing so, but in this study, 47% of the people using these trails are hiking. Less than a third are skiing, and then even fewer are fat biking or alpine skiing or snowshoeing. Cucumber Gulch. This is an example where I think that the numbers are a bit skewed just because one of our counters was down at an important spot and it wasn't caught for a number of weeks, I think 5. So you have the combination of the trail counter not working at Toad Alley, unbeknownst to us, and the Toad Alley Trail being closed 3 weeks early for the reroute construction. So our naturalists felt like it was similar use levels as in the past. Sorry, I can't point to anything without stuff popping up. But if you look at the other access points on this bar graph, White Wolf and Shock Hill and Nordic West, they're pretty similar levels to the year before. And Toad Alley is way down. So my educated guess is that number's down due to the trail counter being down.
Is there a counter on Pence Miller?
There's not. The closest counter would be, we call it the Shock Hill, and it's kind of the almost the overlook area right before you descend down into Josie's cabin.
Okay.
Where that little neighborhood access trail comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Okay, Troll Stegan. This trail's amazing. I mean, getting back to how many of our users are hikers, and this is a short access to a neat artistic expression in the woods that you can access via bus or, you know, there's plenty of parking and it's an all-persons trail. Those numbers are huge. One thing to note about just the winter numbers compared to the summer numbers on these graphs is that in the winter, as the snow piles up, it often turns into an out and back because the back trail, the egress trail isn't maintained, and the snow can create a I don't know, convex roll, so, you know, something prohibitive, and it gets closed off, and so people are passing the trail counter on the way in and on the way out in the winter, or in the summer, they're not, that it would be passing the trail counter only the way in and then exiting in the egress trail. So just, I think that's why the winter numbers are so close to the summer numbers. I think use is higher there in the summer, but almost 1,000 people per day in the summer, and 840 minus the egress factor in the winter.
Is the ingress trail maintained during the winter at all?
It's not,
I didn't think it was. but
yeah,
it just
we,
gets packed Down, is that what happened?
it comes pretty packed down, and then the springtime, it becomes a little bit of an issue, but for just our liability purposes, if we do any type of maintenance, then that is expected each day, each hour to maintain those certain standards. So we pretty much just put up high alpine conditions exist for that.
I think when I was over in that area one day in the winter, I heard some people kind of grumbling that it wasn't easy for them to
Mhm.
get in to see the troll in the winter.
Yeah,
So I didn't think we did.
yeah. We've been lucky this winter so far with lots of good snow. Yeah.
Another big project, as we'll discuss next, has been Camp Hale, working with the Volpe Center and the county and Blue River and Colorado Springs Utility to help manage these areas for the levels of use that they're receiving, especially now that they're receiving the monument designation. So again, we'll be discussing this next, but tentative plan is to USFS to take this to NEPA analysis this summer. Okay, here's our team. It's an incredible group, and appreciate working with you guys and being on the team. And Canine support team, thanks to Joel for a new photo. Joel is the right guy to take that picture.
Alex, your dog has officially joined the pack.
Great, thank you. You know where we're located. Come visit us, call us, go to the website.
I did have a question on, I should have asked it during the slide, but on our all persons trail on to Riling Dredge, I find myself wondering how well that's used by people who have disability. And I'm wondering if it's worth, well, I'm curious if staff has had any conversation about trying to capture any data about that. And you had the slide about cameras, and I'm curious if that, to me, I just wonder, like, are we meeting the need? Is the crusher fine too much? Like, there's just questions there to make sure we're doing what we set out to do. So I'm like curious if staff has had any conversations about that.
I think that's a great point. In going back when we started this whole process, I think having in partnering with the BOEC has been great to have like their expertise and come out and actually walk the trail beforehand, afterhand, and look at what they see and feel. And we brought out wheelchairs out there too. So I feel,
Jeffrey.
yeah, right. And at other times we did. And so I feel good that we're being able to accommodate. I think the next step, to maybe a little bit of your point, Nikki, is how do we get the word out there, and how do we inform users that these trails are there and what kind of conditions they are? And so I think working on with our social media and Breck Tourism, and then hopefully with Merge and our signage, and be able to provide that informational signage at that trailhead so that user can make that informed decision, because there's so many varieties of people with mobility impaired. Like, it's hard to categorize, and everybody, even with the same disposition, might have a different mindset and be able to do something. So I think one, continuing to help get the word out there, improving our signage at that trailheads will help. And then maybe we do put out a camera out there or something and see, and then, and then it's like, how do we measure that? Like, if only, say, 4 people with we see mobility impaired came out there a week, is that good or bad? How do we weigh that? I mean, because for that one person, that was an amazing experience that they were just to be out there. So it'd be interesting. So did that kind of
Yeah,
get to your
I'm with you.
point?
I
or-
don't know what the data, the implications would be necessarily, or how to make sense of them, but I think having the data in the first place would be valuable.
Yeah.
Especially because we did build that parking lot with that's explicit intention, and I'm just curious if it's getting utilized, so.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, like, in a casual conversation with Jeffrey, we were talking about, to push somebody in a wheelchair up that trail would be a bit arduous for a lot of people, so it's like, do we need to revisit the surface? Just questions about how to make it do what it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I think, with any of these trails, it's on our list now. It's almost like a weekly thing to go check, like, is the lip of the bridge, that's gotta be smooth, we'll have extra crusher fines next to those. So it's gonna be like a constant checklist maintenance to go to these trails and make sure that we are saying what this sign says. There's no bumps, there's no obstructions, and so that will be part of it too.
The Biffa installation there last year might have gotten it some publicity. I mean, we went out to see that, and it was a pretty cool installation. And there were other people there too that might not have ever gone to that particular trail, except that Biffa was there. So, I mean, that might be the kind of thing that gets some attention to some of our trails that we want more attention
Right.
to.
Yeah, and just getting that word out there. But spending the time out at that troll trail and seeing those folks, like, we hadn't even fully opened it, and to see the word get out and those people get out there and enjoy the trail, and then having a conversation with them after, like, what did you think of the trail? How was it? Did it work for you? It was inspiring, and it was rewarding as well. So
I wonder if there's a way we can like put a QR code or a sign or something at the troll and be like, if you enjoyed this experience,
more.
we have more. Yeah.
Or even collecting feedback.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
like a brief survey, like, did that meet your needs?
Yeah.
Is this what you expected?
cool.
Yeah, no, I hope it's clear. I think it's amazing
Yeah.
work, and I'm just curious to get more information, but it's amazing.
Jay, maybe we can get you as a town council liaison to do one of your town council's social media. I'm out here at the, yeah.
We're coffee talk. We were just,
Yeah.
talking about our next place for a coffee talk.
My one other question was, my memory on this is really fuzzy, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed at one point, maybe in the last 2 years, we took over doing more maintenance in the Golden Horseshoe to help the county or Forest Service. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, it wouldn't. So I want to say maybe it was 7 or 8 years ago, Jordan, we signed the special youth authorization agreement with the Forest Service, maybe five
Okay,
ish.
okay.
And so with that agreement, we would take over management of non-motorized trails within the Golden Horseshoe. And the Golden Horseshoe boundary, we even expanded to include Pinball Alley, Mountain Pride, and Baker's Tank. The Forest Service has been pretty flexible with us on that agreement, and understanding that we prioritized our trails first, and then when we can get to the Forest Service trails, we'll manage them as well. But this particular summer, we are planning some Friends of Breckenridge Trail events and some crew time on Baker's Tank to kind of help fulfill that agreement with them. And then that overall agreement was just kind of our partnering neighborhood agreement. And then, in hopes that we're good neighbors, we're good partners, and we do want to do a potential reroute or a new trail, the Forest Service would take that into favor and consideration.
Does it feel like it's within the capacity of our trail crew to keep up with all this?
It's a balancing act for sure, Nikki, and trying to prioritize projects and what gets done in a short season. But I think there's a way to do it. And I think incorporating Friends of Dillon Ranger District and our Friends of Breckenridge Trail program into that, I think that's a kind of a good avenue that we can take that approach. Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that one?
No. Great time.
Yeah, that was great. Really cool.
Nice.
Right. We'll move on to our CHCDNM planning. It's a lot of letters.
Great. And see here.
Jordan's coming down.
Thanks.
Do. I would just preface this conversation by saying this was a lot of work on staff's part.
Yeah.
So we're really appreciative of them building this spreadsheet.
A little bit.
Great. Yeah, so we'll jump right into the Camp Hill experiment. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to kind of revisit the access plan. We've heard the presentation, we've heard the overall scope of the project. We're able to provide you with lots of data and information and stats. And then this exercise is hopefully just to kind of simplify it, detail the projects, and then bring them back to our master plan and our decision-making framework within the master plan. So the goal is to kind of check those boxes. I think ideally, it'd be great if we could go through each trailhead one by one, kind of go through the grid, see what you guys think, if you agree with some of the comments that staff has made, if you'd like to add something in. And then we can come back to these two questions and go from there.
Good.
Is that good? So we'll start with the Quandary Trailhead. Maybe it's the easiest one. It's weird this is so faded. So concepts, paving the existing lot, expanding into the Aspen Springs, offering the shuttles, adjusting frequencies, a possible trail connection. And then we're also looking at improved signage, a vault toilet, an informational kiosk. And once again, this is like the big picture, the broad scope. It's everything in the bucket, so the Forest Service can kind of review it. But if we kind of approve these general concepts, agree with it, how it matches up with our master plan, I think we can revisit these and then prioritize what makes sense to us in the county, the Forest Service. So let's stick with conservation, and I'm not going to read all the comments, but if you guys, something jumped out in this table that was missing or you would like to add or agree with or don't agree with?
I had a question about the process. And the instructions said that this part of the analysis was taken from page 27 of the master plan. And so I pulled out page 27 of the master plan and some of these things, most of them are from that page, but there's a couple that were picked from other parts of the master plan, which
Oh,
is
yeah?
not surprising because this stuff is scattered throughout the master plan. For instance, the habitat sensitivity wasn't on page 27, it was on page 22. And the avoid scenic views and visual disturbances was on page 25. And it wasn't, those two things weren't summarized on page 27.
Okay.
So in terms of making the master plan work for us,
Yeah.
I think we need to be kind of anal about checking all the boxes.
I think, and I can take responsibility for not being clearer in the packet, but I think the PDF paging of the master plan and the page numbers on the master plan are different. And so what I meant was the page number 27 as listed on the master plan, which is called page 30 on the PDF. And I wonder if that doesn't clarify.
Yeah, because I do think those criteria that we use are pulled directly from that.
But not from what's page 20. There's two things that are not on page 27, this trail development guidelines page, which is numbered.
Okay.
Page 27.
Yes, that's the one okay.
So habitat sensitivity and avoid scenic views, those are really important, but
The first conservation bullet is avoid sensitive habitat in areas of high quality natural resources.
and that is at the top there. under conservation.
Yes.
That's the first one. But when you get down to the bottom, you've got another habitat sensitivity and avoids scenic views and visual disturbances on your chart. If you look down on the blue column to the bottom near it.
Correct.
And this is just process. What
Oh,
are we
no,
supposed to be looking at?
And this is great.
So we like refine this. We want to keep doing it in a way that works for.
Yeah. Yep. And so this was, I think, used when we looked at the projects, trail projects, the Dry Gulch Trail project we looked at, and we created this framework. And so this framework was used again for the trailhead amenities. So what do you think about this framework?
Well, all I'm saying is that those two things are in our master plan as things to consider, but so are other things besides what's on the trail development guidelines. Problem is, there's several sections of our master plan that talk about decision-making process.
Yep.
And it's not all consolidated in one place.
Well, I think habitat sensitivity, I think it's a wording situation because habitat sensitivity is on our master plan. It's just worded a little bit different. No, on page 27, even on
That's
this
what,
page.
that's what's at the very first one.
Yeah,
avoid
So maybe it's just a little bit of a organizational, like, I think probably when we were doing Dry Gulch, you guys tried to make the wording more simplified just to fit it on the chart, and it might have been a little bit confusing.
I think also it's true. There's these four strategic goals in the master plan. And when we've been looking at acquisitions, that's been more conservation strategic goal framing the decision. For this access plan recommendations, this is really a recreation management discussion. So we use the trail development guidelines, even though we're not just talking about trails, we're talking about parking lots and bathrooms and things. But yeah, it's kind of figuring out which falls into which bucket. And then if there's overlap, how do we merge the two? And that's a work in progress for sure.
Right, yeah, and I think as we go through these things more, it'll become more familiar and it won't be so much, well, where did this come from in this chart? Yeah. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing those other two things, it's just that I'm trying to understand what our process really is gonna be.
Yeah. And so I would like to say this is a process, but we can add to it or delete from it. Like, I think we create it now. Like, it's such a new process for us that we have the opportunity to make sure that it encompasses everything that we want to do. So if we're happy with the way things are listed here, I think we can incorporate that into this framework. Or if you would like to add something else, we could do that. Like, this wasn't considered, or we didn't mention this, or we didn't talk about that. I think it's great to have a conversation about it now and make it right. Any other comments just on the Quandary Trailhead? I feel like this one is, I wouldn't say the easiest, but since we have a lot of infrastructure and subtle systems and reservations going on there already, like, this kind of was maybe the easiest one. Does anyone have any?
Tony, I brought this up a couple months ago, and it's a question about the necessity to increase the parking. Given that there's a shuttle system that I think our goal with the county is to continue to see that used and be even more popular, does adding additional parking, is that kind of counter to making the shuttle system successful? And so I guess I'm not necessarily saying that we don't include the parking as a long-term plan or approach, but that we need to, balance that. And I'd be interested to hear other people's comments, including Jordan's.
Yeah, I think I can address that. Jordan Mead, Summit County Open Space. One of the goals that could maybe be more clearly stated in the plan draft that we have as now is to try to bring back some of that use at McCullough Gulch, which then can hopefully bring some of that high level of use from Spruce Creek down. So I think it really has to do with how we manage that parking and who we designate those spaces for. So one of the goals is to create more parking to get more folks to McCullough Gulch to provide that experience. because it creates easier access in that location without taking the shuttle from Brecktown to Quandary Peak Trailhead, and then transferring shuttles onto another shuttle and then going down the road to finally get to your hiking access. This would be just a more convenient way, hopefully, for people to get to McCullough Gulch and replace some of the use that has been displaced there. So but to your point, the shuttle utilization rates are fairly low, and we definitely could put more stress on increasing that.
Thought that the additional parking would help pay for the shuttle.
Yeah.
And that was the rationalization. And I'm with you that it's like more is not always better, and especially when you're paving it and striping it and everything. But I think that was the rationalization that I heard, was that
Yeah.
the more people that are parking there and paying, the less the county and the town have to subsidize the shuttle.
It isn't, that's a little bit contrary to our boots and buses, not cars philosophy of the town.
I agree.
Yeah, except we gotta subsidize the shuttle somehow, you know.
But Americans will always want to drive rather than take a bus. I mean, it's.
Right, but to make the shuttle self-sustaining, which is another goal, we do need to charge for parking, and if we have some more parking, we're gonna bring in more revenue for the shuttle. I get it, but you have more parking and then more cars are going there.
Right, and maybe
but-
fewer people on the shuttle.
Jordan, when you were talking about McCullough Gulch, are you thinking that, I know we're gonna talk about McCullough Gulch, but just also that more people could park at Quandary Trailhead and then do the new connector to get up there?
Yeah, that, and there's the free on-site shuttle.
Oh,
So
it
once you,
just goes up.
that just goes up to McCullough Gulch, so you'd be able to get on the road that way. Yeah, and again, I think this is important to keep in mind that all of these things would be happening on jointly owned town and county land. And so before any of these proposed expansions would happen and what the size of them would be another formal conversation about approving those, land uses on our jointly owned lands as well. So from a NEPA perspective, this one also doesn't have those kind of like Forest Service implications about what they propose, because these are jointly owned lands. And so this is definitely open for some further conversation.
One other thought on the shuttle is it's also an objective in the access plan to make it free.
Yep.
So that subsidy is also important to try to meet that goal. Generating revenue for the subsidy.
So that's a good point. So then if we do expand parking, we can make money on that and people will still drive, but we will have a free option to get there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I think it makes sense. It's our only 14er in the county, and it seems pretty behind other trailheads of 14ers. So I think it's kind of necessary.
I guess, what is the objective of the paving? It said so we don't have to stripe it as often.
Yeah, so right now it's a dirt lot. And so it's striping, and then any rain, wind, erosion, the Summit County crew is up there. I'm not sure how often they're up there, but they're restriping the lanes.
And is that a slippery slope for us of paving this and then, having that go, well, let's pave the next trailhead. And I don't know, I feel like it's contrary to, and maybe not one of the goals, which I know that we're supposed to stick to the master plan and that, but just kind of more the soul. Hurts a little bit on that one, and I'm just curious if that's where you stand.
I think Duke had a similar comment too. But I think as we move forward, we've got another big study that we've been studying all our other local trailheads in front country, mid-country trailheads, and categorizing them with their level of use and close proximity to transportation. And part of that would be, maybe front country high use trailhead would receive recycled asphalt or paving. And I think that's kind of the criteria that we're looking at, is, possibly down the road where we're seeing a lot of high use at these trailheads, maybe recycled asphalt makes sense, and maybe it doesn't. But I think at the quandary where we're seeing such high use. We're up there doing continuous maintenance on the striping that it does make sense in this particular case. But I think as we go down the line and look at the B&B or the Riling Dredge or Sally Barber, I think it's an important conversation that we have. And if this categorization that we're going through doesn't make sense for us.
One thing about this lot relative to the others in the Camp Hale plan is that it's right off the highway and not down a dirt road. So there's that consideration. Like, it'd be pretty, in my estimation, silly to pave the Spruce Creek parking lot when you need to drive up that long dirt road, but this is right off the highway.
Yeah. Super confused, so follow me on this one, dude. Like I sat down with this, tried to understand what the ask was in this exercise, you know, and where BOSAC has a voice in this. Obviously, we all have voices in it, but using our master plan to try to analyze an engagement in a federal national monument and trying to use our tools to make some decisions there. And so I went through it, read our master plan, looked at all this, but what we still don't have is kind of a grading mechanism or a go or no go. And so I walked through it and I'm like, you know, obviously our voice is to inform council so that they can then speak to the questions that are going to be placed in front of them. I couldn't close the loop on the ask using our tools for what the questions were. I appreciate what you guys did go through it, but it wasn't an organic process for me. Like, as I tried to work through it, I'm like, I came out of it doing what I felt we tried to accomplish with the master plan, which was to make it less arbitrary and less, you know, personal opinion. But I went through the process and I tried to do the exercise, but I still came out of here's what I think it should be, or here's how I would like to see it, as opposed to the tool. So one, I don't know if anybody else kind of experienced that, but it just seems like we're still not quite. I think our tool is great for kind of our local acquisitions and space acquisitions and how we're managing our space. But I did have a hard time leaping it over to a national monument and then trying to offer guidance.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that stood out to me with the master plan is it talks about, it mentioned hot zones. You catch that part, and does it decrease hot zones? And it's like,
Right.
well, this is a known hot zone. We're trying to
The hottest.
build it up to protect it and manage the current levels of visitor use that it receives. So
I guess, yeah, like I said, even going through it all, it's like, how are we grading this? What are we going to pass along to council on a broader scope so they can speak to what comes next in this process? So
one thing, Chris, is just the master plan helps me at least, like, make sure I'm considering everything and not forgetting any of these key components to recreation or conservation or something. And I don't know that it does a great job of prioritizing within the goals. You know, when you have access and inclusion and conservation in conflict, you know, what do you decide? Well, that's maybe where your opinion needs to come in as a commissioner. But it's or the way we're using the master plan is just to make sure you're considering both of those and weighing them and deciding, well, I lean towards this. So I guess that's how I would read it. I get it. This is a bit tricky. You know, a lot of this is Forest Service property, and we're recommending to council essentially, like, are we comfortable with these set of recommendations to move forward to a NEPA analysis? But it isn't in town and it doesn't directly correlate with our master plan in every way. So I understand.
My question too, Chris, is like, if this checked 8 out of the 10 boxes, is that what you kind of would want to see? Like, we're
I
good.
guess I'm putting my
8 out of 10.
my
we're
business
good.
cap on and I'm like, you know, are we at 80% of, you know, meeting our criteria? Are we at 60%? You know, it's just hard because it's a lot of things are, yeah, that all looks great. That's an improvement that should help offset, you know, kind of some of the visitor impact. All those things are great, but what's our thresholds? What's our measurables? And when do we say, yeah, this is good, we recommend it and we support it? And when do we say objectively no?
Yeah.
And I couldn't find our no's, right? I couldn't find it, something in here where it's like, here's the line that we're gonna say, don't cross this and it's too far.
And it
Um,
could even be that it's 60% for one trail or decision point
Right,
and
and not
85
the
for
collective,
another, you
right.
know.
So like I said, I think we have a lot to talk about and I think, you know, collectively we'll be able to give some guidance to council, and this whole project, but yeah, it just felt like I came in personally a little short of being able to say yes, absolutely yes, or absolutely no, or come up with bigger questions inside of it.
Yeah, and I think it's hard too, because one question might weigh in more than another. You know, if we went back this summer or this spring and looked at the Toad Alley reroute and what did we want to do? And, you know, do we weigh, you know, wildlife or hydrology or recreation, and which is more, you know, we ended up deciding kind of in this middle zone of a compromise there, and we didn't, you know, so it's hard to say 8 out of 10 is good, but these other two are pretty, that it didn't check, or damaging. So then we have a conversation about it, I guess. So, but I can see your point too, Chris.
And maybe that's a great learning experience that we, you know, are kind of stress testing our master plan, you know, to make decisions like this, which is what the initial intent was. And it could have been that too. It might have been just I'm a little long in the tooth with this. And I'm like, I was hoping that plan was gonna help me provide the answers that you guys asked of me. I wanted the cheat sheet, but there was still more gray than black and white.
And I think, yeah, this is why we're doing it and why we're bringing that up. I think this is the perfect opportunity to work through it.
I think it was a good attempt at looking at our master plan policies. And I guess the hope would be if there's a fatal flaw, that we identify it. But a lot of this stuff is, as you can see, we said, no, this is,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
mean,
it's
most
within the
everything passed
realm.
muster,
So
In
at that point, I think what we're really doing is weighing in on the actual proposal itself and like you know, the 6 items that we had in terms of paving and, you know, expanding parking, continuing the shuttle, those things are proposed, and whether you guys are comfortable with those, given that they seem to make it through the open space filter
and this,
plan.
yeah, and to go on that, this is coming from a professional contractor with years of experience and a whole year of studying data and doing outreach, and Summit County staff doing this proposal. It's not like just somebody throwing a dart at a dartboard and saying, we're going to pave it or do this. So there's a lot of good background and intention to these proposals as well.
Agreed. Thanks for some clarification. I appreciate it.
What's the cost burden lay in all this? Is that from federal? Is that from the money from the national monument designation?
Yeah, and I think the rough rule of thumb goal is if you own the property, then you need to manage and pay for the improvements and amenities on that property. So in this case, I mean, that's again, rule of thumb, but we would be talking about quantity of parking lot. If it's on the land that we jointly own with the county, then say paving the parking lot would be an expense for the county and the town to split. And then we touched on the management framework last month, but that, you know, there's grant opportunities and there's a lot of question marks in future funding, and hopefully with the monument designation that can garner additional funding to pay for some of these more expensive projects. But, you know, I think the goal is that you pay for the improvements made on the properties you own.
So would we be looking at putting this in this 5-year CIP and trying to find a placeholder for phasing these projects?
I think so. Yes, Jay. You know, that would be, it gets through all the whole NEPA analysis. But if on the other end, it's like, okay, these are approved and we want to move forward with some of these, or at least start budgeting for them, then it would be 5-year CIP phasing.
Just paving the parking lot would be?
I don't know about that, but just thinking about how expensive all these proposals are, or, you know, improvements are when you add them up. No, maybe not necessarily paving the parking lot, but, well, I don't have analysis in front of me, but some of the more expensive items, I think we would want to make a plan with the county. When can we afford to do these different things, and how are we gonna share the costs?
But you're talking, wouldn't that come out of the open space budget and not out like
Oh,
the
yeah.
general fund?
I'm sorry, you said CIP, open space budget, but I think it would have to get phased into our budget.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Any more on Quandary? It's good. This is good, really good. I'm glad we're having these conversations and talk.
One of the things that didn't get answered was on the Quandary one was about experiences for differently abled, and there's just nothing there, a yes or a no, and I assume that's probably a no.
Yes, I think so. Yep. Thank you.
And also, under community context, we didn't address whether it created a needed community connection. That was one of the things that was on that, list under community context. That's the last one on the list, create a needed community connection, and we didn't address that one.
I see partnership opportunities as the last.
On page 27 under trail development guidelines, that page is what I was looking at.
Great, thank you, Bobby.
And I'm not sure exactly what create a needed community connection really means, but
Well, we might put it on there and be like NA.
No, but it's good. It should be listed, I think getting back to like, this helps us think about things we might otherwise forget.
I assume that's really why we have this written down, is so that we will at least go through the exercise of considering some of this stuff. And partnership opportunities, which there clearly are, isn't on this trail development guidelines thing at all. It's on page 24 of our master plan. I don't know, I think it's a good thing for us to consider when we're going through this, but it didn't quite make it into that section.
Right. And that kind of brings you back full circle to your original comment of when we pull stuff in and when we don't.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it may be that we look at different things for different types of projects.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I guess we just need to understand why a particular criteria made it into this one, but didn't into that. That's a little brain freezes going on.
Yeah, no, that's good. Cool.
But I like the idea of going through it in an
Okay.
organized fashion and really considering what the implications are for the different factors in a particular project. And this is good.
Okay. Right. Anything else on Quandary? Okay. We will jump right into Blue Lakes. Any comments on the Blue Lakes table that jumped out?
Tony, just a general question
Yeah.
on partnership. Can you speak to, like Colorado Springs Utilities, how engaged they've been with the process and how open and collaborative they've been? I just haven't heard a lot about that.
Jordan, can I?
Absolutely.
Reggie? Yeah.
The Forest Service has really been leading the conversations with them, but they have been involved in both our initial stakeholder meetings, our stakeholder workshop that we had back in October. We had a representative from Colorado Springs Utilities. They've commented on a couple of iterations of this draft as well, and they've expressed the least willingness to work with us to meet some of these proposed goals that we're putting for Blue Lakes and McCullough Gulch, especially where they have a lot of their infrastructure. So we have an initial indication that none of these things are out of the question from their perspective and at a staff level, at least at this point.
What about from a management standpoint?
I think that there's a bigger conversation that needs to happen with Colorado Springs Utilities when it would come time for the Forest Service to acquire a license agreement or any kind of land use agreement for this trailhead. That would have to go to Colorado Springs City Council to be approved. So that it would have to be, I think, elevated at that time when we went to make an agreement. But I think this goes back to the kind of land ownership and responsibility because this is Forest Service adjacent and most of this trailhead lies on Forest Service. We really do expect that they would take the lead on negotiating that, holding any easement for that parking area.
Thank you, Jordan. Anything else?
I'm just gonna bang this drum one more time. The trail connections, I'm just thrown by. I question, and please, if people have thoughts on this, I would love to hear, because I'd love to be proven wrong, but trail connection from the Quandary parking area to this area, I just don't understand who would use it. I just see these, I've said it, and I'll just say it briefly again. I see these areas as very siloed with very specific users. And I love in theory the connectivity, but I just question who's going to use it. And I want to be scrutinizing of if they're worth implementing. And I believe this one is the one that Colorado 14ers put in their grant. Is that would help bolster?
That was above the Blue Lakes
Oh,
road
above
up the
it.
Monte Cristo Gulch and
Okay.
yep,
Okay, that's
eliminating the social trails.
yeah, okay. But this one and then the, optimizing on the old Wheeler alignment to connect McCullough to Quandary. I hope they would get used if they get built, but I'm curious what other people think about it, because I don't really see it.
Can someone remind us how long those would be again to both? The connector trails to Blue Lakes and to McCullough, do you remember?
About 2.1 miles, so it doesn't really reduce the distance. It just gets hikers off the road, primarily in the shoulder season. For the Quandary to Blue Lakes, we're looking at the range of 1.1 miles approximately, probably a little longer than that, given the terrain and the amount of elevation you'd have to gain and lose. So a fairly long connection, but I've had very similar thoughts to what Nikki shared as well on the usage of that. And we've also heard from the neighbors in that area that would maybe be something they would be less supportive of. And we actually are doing another round of engagement with the neighbors around the Quandary Peak area and Spruce Creek as well to say, okay, we've talked to you in the first round. Now here's what we're putting out there as proposed actions. Tell us what you think of them. And this was talked about at our first meeting with them, and they had some concerns as well.
And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that Wheeler connection, I understand getting people off the road, but it's probably an additional 500 vertical feet of climbing. So it's just a lot to ask somebody to use that. So.
Absolutely. I agree. I think these are really valuable comments.
And yet that's what I do when I go. up
No,
there.
we're talking about a different one, Bobby.
Not the McCullough.
You're talking about the lower McCullough to upper. This is Quandary to McCullough on the Wheeler alignment. So it's an old trail that they would essentially like reestablish.
Okay.
But if I'm just curious, like other people's take on these trail connections.
Yeah, I don't know when you would use it. But we wouldn't use it necessarily. But
No, I'm thinking of the general population. I would use it, but I'm thinking of the Gen Pop, like these people are not wanting to, it just seems too much adding too much to what their objective is. And so I don't see why people would use it.
Well, the people who show up at the visitor center at 1 p.m. in shorts and flip flops are not going to use it, I'm sure.
Nikki, are you talking about what are you talking about, McCullough?
So I bet it's essentially a trail that's on the north side of the road. And that is like steep, kind of rough terrain. I mean, that would be
on that hillside too.
Yeah.
Not too long ago. Can we buy some mining?
Yeah.
Beans on
Yeah.
that hill.
County too.
Are we talking about Blue Lakes or McCullough?
Blue Lakes.
Blue
Kristen.
Lakes.
Connecting what?
Quandary.
Trailhead, trailhead.
Blue Lakes.
Oh, okay.
Would be, paralleling the road somewhat.
Mhm.
And then I think we're all in agreement, Nikki, of like, it might be a last priority for this, even if it does get done, but it's just kind of getting thrown in as a potential, creating that central hub, I think is what they're talking about at the Quandary Trailhead as that central hub location to have trail access to other trails. But I think we kind of all agree, like, does it make sense with those particular user groups visiting those areas? Would they use it?
I do wonder too if it would create some susceptibility to people. I mean, it would be a bit of a rough social trail, but actually you like peeling off the Quandary Trail down to Blue Lakes, like from the ridge.
Oh.
So they wouldn't park like maybe right above tree line, ditching over to that side.
Mhm.
Just to, I mean, who knows what people will do, but
people
I
used
do
to-
wonder about that.
Pretty, isn't there?
And they used to go that, they used to be the route, right, to the East Ridge?
Mhm.
Was actually on the north, like the north, side. The very old, the old trailhead, right, Jordan?
I believe so, yeah.
But then there was one up Blue Lakes Road too, like low down where you could get up onto the
Yeah,
East Ridge. too.
Yes, and there's like an old cabin up there.
What about, so like Tony said, I think we agree, maybe this shouldn't be the high on the priority list, but how do you guys feel about just having this on the recommended list as an option and going through the NEPA study? Like, can it be included in the bucket? Are we comfortable with that, or we think it shouldn't even be examined as a possibility?
If it's in the NEPA bucket, does that mean that that after it gets approved by NEPA, they're expecting it to get done?
No, no, that's a key distinction with all of these, is that it doesn't mean it has to get done. It means that, it will catch, there'll be more public comment. There'll be a closer look at like the ologists, as they say, we'll examine these possibilities and potential impacts. And then if it makes it through there, then it's like, okay, yes, this is still an option. And then like Jordan was talking about, the managing partners can work together to decide, do we want to move forward with this? And if so, when, or would it be the last option? Or maybe I don't know. I mean, I echo what Tony said, is that I think we all agree this isn't one of our first options and doesn't make sense right away, but I'm wondering, do we want to keep this in there as like a later possibility, at least to be analyzed through NEPA?
And then we have the option to decide yay or nay.
Correct.
Maybe we don't want to spend our money.
That. Who would decide yay or nay after the NEPA process?
It's joint ownership in this
Yep.
area, so this would cross jointly owned town and county land, so we would have some say in its implementation, where it crosses town and county land, so it would be really I think a cooperative decision between us and the Forest Service, and I think probably going to be limited by budget and then staff availability to like implement it, because I tend to agree this is very rough terrain and probably a lower priority. I guess just speaking to this, I mean, as we know, the Forest Service doesn't have infinite capacity for doing these things. And so I think that if there are certain features like this that would require some pretty intense data gathering and some pretty rough terrain, as far as like it's not, there's nothing wrong with saying this maybe should not be part of the scope. I think that's perfectly fine. Because it does really start to like make it more of a accomplishable task, since we do want to collect a lot of this data in this coming summer, and focusing on the things that we really want to see happen, I think is a smart and prudent thing to do. So,
Do you think you're saying to leave it off?
I
Take it
mean,
out?
I can't make that. I don't want to make the recommendations for you, but I think if there are things like this that are questionable, slimming down on what is going to the NEPA analysis will make it a more expedited process and less different alternatives to assess. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think hearing it's less favorable for the neighborhood, and you're doing more public engagement, so maybe that will be more informed there as well, but. Sorry, were you saying something?
Well, I guess just to get back to the original intent of why this is in here, the connection in the first place, it's that the proposal is trying to establish, tell me if I'm wrong, this is what I'm gathering, is that it's trying to establish the Quandary Trailhead parking lot as the hub for all of these different hikes. And so ideally, people are using that either for the shuttle or for parking, and then using that to get to Blue Lakes.
Right.
That's the overall goal, right? So you're just adding 2 rugged miles to a hike.
I would just, that's just.
To be devil's advocate, I do think that this was originally brought up because if you wanted to make that Hoosier Pass, the Wheeler Trail, ultimate like big picture connection, you'd have to go that way because of the neighborhood. And there are like there's like that Crystal Lake Trail off of North, what's it called? North Star. And so, yeah, I think that if you ever wanted to involve Hoosier Pass in any of this, you might want that trail connection. But it's super, I agree, like lowest priority.
You don't think you could just use the road for that?
Totally could use the road, but I think you need to maintain a single track connection all the way from Hoosier. You have to skirt around the neighborhood and kind of meet up at Blue Lakes to get to this from New McCullough. Single track. So way down the line, bigger picture, multiple NEPAs and stuff. But that was just kind of, I think the original thought process was like, oh, you could connect everything if you went that way.
How long does a NEPA approval last? If we include all this and they approve all this and then we are picking and choosing amongst them, does the approval go away if it's not executed after a certain amount of time?
I think it's roughly around 10 years.
That's plenty of time.
We can do that.
Do we have thoughts on keeping it or ditching it, the trail? I mean, maybe we have that conversation at the end so we can hear people's thoughts on the Quandary to McCullough one as well. I'm not sure. What are you thinking, group? NOSOC?
I think you just keep it in and see how the cards fall on something like this. Because there might be some opportunities that are, yeah, I'd keep it in. Even if we don't totally understand the reasons why.
Anyone else have, Jay, do you have thoughts on that?
No, I really don't. I think that it'd be interesting to have it vetted through a public process that the Forest Service conducted and then kind of see what the feedback came on, and if there was something enlightening in there, then you can make that decision at that point. But I guess I don't see a compelling reason to take it off at this point with what's at risk.
In this proposal, is the Blue Lakes parking lot still free?
Yeah, it's mentioned in the plan that it could evolve into a reservation system. And one of the concerns there is if it starts to get too busy, they don't want a lot of traffic on that road. It's a steep road. That's just problematic. The neighbors don't want traffic. Reservation system would help reduce traffic because you would know whether you have a spot or not before you drove up the road.
Or if it got so busy up there, people would park at Quandary and use the trail to get up there.
True.
That's what I'm kind of getting at. I'm like, well,
That's why I was worried about the social trail off of building, like people parking there and getting up Quandary from Blue Lakes.
oh,
Like establishing, well, Mark said there are already social trails, but people just doing that as like a workaround.
yeah. I guess I can see that, but I feel like the majority of people that are looking to do a 14er are not looking to off-road a 14er.
Yeah, I guess I would say, I think these connectors go against conservation. I think if the neighborhood doesn't want them, that means a lot. I hope the public engagement really leans into exploring and making sure we know what these neighborhoods want. I think it introduces wildlife fragmentation. Like I feel very strongly that these should not be on the NEPA analysis, but I'm just one voice. That's just my take. This one and the Wheeler piece as well, which we can talk about when we get to it, but.
Can you talk a little bit, what are your concerns about conservation?
Well, it just seems like that's land that we don't need to disrupt, like building a brand new trail right up that valley. It would be, like Jordan said, it's really arduous terrain. It would be, and maybe the writing's on the wall that no one would ever get around to doing this, but I don't understand the purpose of it. To me, it's like building a trail for no reason, truly. Like I just see these as such siloed locations with very specific user groups. So it's like when we're scrutinizing of the Rose Trail, or we're getting really, I mean, truly, like we're picking apart when we have trails and when we don't. I'd say this is exactly the same thing. But I really think it should be informed by the neighborhood. I think they should have a lot of weight in that conversation. So do we know when, I know the public process, maybe that's a Jordan question, but when you re-engage the, like McGill and whomever else, Spruce Creek.
Yeah, that survey is live. We right now have like mailings, postcards that are going out that have QR code and a bit.ly link that goes directly to that survey. I think some additional outreach it's difficult because it's targeted towards the people who live in these neighborhoods, and the best way we have to get a hold of them is mailing them, because we have mailing addresses from the assessor's office. So that's what we're using typically to get to that targeted audience. We're expecting to have those surveys back March 14th. So with, our goal of bringing this to our BOCC in early April. So that's when we're expecting to get. And I think that this is all good commentary. And I think that if we continue to hear similar things from the neighborhood, that this trail connection isn't warranted, or that they're not supportive of it. And then if BOCC and OSAC, who's going to look at this again this next month, all have similar comments, then that tells us, I think, at the staff level that, okay, we're feeling that there's sentiment from multiple different entities that this isn't something we want to include. And I think that we take that into consideration when we make that ultimate decision, because there are a lot of people who are weighing into this process. And so, even BOSAC says we, definitively want this out, then we have partners at the forest and at the county level as well, who are gonna weigh in on this, and not to mention our neighbors and the public. So I think we can take all those different viewpoints into consideration and see how things fall out.
Thanks.
Do you think that if doing that extra trail would not take people off of the Blue Lakes Road, the road to Blue Lakes? It wouldn't reduce the traffic there?
Well, people would, I think it'd be a rare moment when someone would hike up that road. I think that's a few and far between sort of incident. I think people are either just going to Quandary or going to Blue Lakes. But I don't see them as actually really something that people are integrating as visits of any sort, so.
Yeah, I was looking at it more as they could park at Quandary and then walk if there's not adequate parking at
I mean, looking at the data, what do I know? But I'd say that's probably an extenuating circumstance. I wouldn't think that would happen too often, but perhaps, Bobby, I don't know either.
Yeah. And your point about habitat fragmentation and disturbing wildlife to put in another trail is a very valid point. I think that's something we need to really consider before we build any trails, is habitat fragmentation.
Yeah, good points. And then, looking at those trail designs too, and how closely they do parallel that road corridor. That road corridor already does have a disturbance to particular wildlife, right? It has that buffer within that, certain zone of that road. So that trail design could be looked into that as well, a certain separation from the road, but not too far, but yet still creating a good user experience. And that would all be played out through the, the NEPA process and analysis.
And I don't know if the Volpe Center, I think they've got a lot of expertise in this, but when you're planning for essentially a national park or national monument, maybe the long-term vision does include connectors like this, because they know how these things evolve over time. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to hear them maybe justify it a little more as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mark, to play devil's advocate with myself, like a good example of that is Rocky Mountain National Park. How all these areas do have connective trails that I estimate probably only like 5% of people use, but it is all interconnected with trails. Like they have a whole network. My sense though is I'm sort of baffled by I'd be curious the user numbers, like who's traveling 9 miles to go from this lake to that lake. Probably a few people, but I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but I think that's a great point.
Good discussion. Yeah.
I do feel like it feels like a trail to nowhere, but I don't feel compelled enough to take it out of the NEPA process at this point. I think it's still interesting to get all of the feedback and to watch them go through the process. Would be my.
Great. And we can kind of circle back when we go back to the original question on this. So we'll jump up to the McCullough Gulch Trail and Trailhead. Anybody want to start off?
I just have a question on all 3 of these. What would be the outside of peak, like summer hours, what is the plan for these parking lots? Are they just first come, first serve in the fall and winter? Okay.
Yes, and that's part of the McCullough Gulch. This idea of building a parking lot where the current shuttle turnaround is that people could use those in the off season and get closer without a reservation, because that's been a complaint that I think the county has fielded, which is just that it's difficult to now access McCullough Gulch during the shoulder season.
Yeah.
This is obviously going to be an iterative process, just like what it was with Quandary when we started managing things differently. My sense is that this would need to continue to be at least a free reservation in the fall time, because as soon as you open a resource that is typically limited, then obviously the demand is going to be for that resource is going to be high. And I think the only way that our sheriff's office is likely to support this recommendation would be with a continued free, probably off-season reservation, still allowing some folks to get to this location, but trying to avoid that, excess demand, parking along the shoulders of the roads, going back to any kind of regression in this area is like really not going to be taken well by our neighbors and by our law enforcement folks. So I think it would probably come with some kind of free reservation in the off season, which is something we need to talk about, but
Jordan, can you just say again, I'll stop on the trails, but how long from Quandary to McCullough that Wheeler portion segment is? So like a mile and a half?
yeah,
That was
the
my guess.
portion, the trail that exists currently is like 1.4 miles. So if you are familiar with the Quandary Trail, as you go up, you get to that kind of four-way intersection where there's a very clear sign that says Quandary Peak Trail straight ahead, because it would be very easy to turn off left or right in that location. The Wheeler Trail alignment is just that kind of crossing route there. And so the plan would be to follow kind of that existing corridor. And that's about 1.4 miles. And that comes into McCullough Gulch, still half a mile down the road from the trail. So then you need to add another kind of half, probably to 3/4 of a mile of a cross sloping trail through the woods. That's exactly right. In order to actually finally connect to the McCullough Gulch Trail. So you're looking in the 2+ mile range. 2.2 is kind of the estimate we're using.
Yeah. So I guess I would just question this group. Would somebody park at Quandary? Maybe, I'm genuinely curious. Would someone park at Quandary and hike 2+ miles with probably 500 feet of vertical gain over to the McCullough Gulch Trail to then hike up to the waterfall? Like maybe
From what I understand right now, that is the access in the off season, and that is people are using the road currently. At least when they call us to ask for permission, and what they're supposed to do are, the letter of the law answer is you park at the Quandary Peak Trailhead and you walk the McCullough Gulch Road to get the McCullough Gulch Trailhead. And I think people probably are pretty upset with us when they get up there and there has been people pushing along the shoulder of the road and they're like, I just walked 2 miles along this dirt road, which is where I think a reserved parking area there plus this trail connection would give everybody a better experience and at least the opportunity to get a little bit closer. So that's the reasoning behind these two proposed options.
So in our previous trails plan, wasn't there a discussion about trying to kind of resurrect the Wheeler Trail?
Yes, there was.
Yeah. This would be one segment.
yeah, that's what Alex was saying.
Yep.
I guess I just find myself trying to understand human choice making in this national monument, like what people will do and not do. So what do we need and what don't we need? That's kind of what I keep going back to.
I think it's such a popular and populated area. The more options I think we provide, the better, and connectivity options would fall into that. I get what you're saying about the habitat fragmentation, but also this area has already been well utilized and programmed. So I don't think we're doing anything different, and we're just bringing back Wheeler Trail. that's kind of been defunct. I don't see the negative. This one makes more sense to me, like connecting the Quandary Peak Trailhead out to McCullough Gulch.
I had another thought. I can remember when we were first talking about the trail connections. And this is funny, it'll be interesting to see when it goes back to the neighborhoods again. I think we kind of put those in there to almost appease the neighbors, like, hey, we're gonna put this concrete, like this lot might become paved and additional shuttles. Maybe we'll build, these trail connections would be a benefit to the locals there as just additional routes. And if you live right there and have hiked Quandary 100 times or whatever, now you have some more
Almost a
multi-use. And of
double
course, we
trail.
wouldn't just do that just to appease the small group of neighbors, but it just occurred like a thought in my head, like, oh, that was one reason why we put these on there. It was like, just gives you options if you live in that area for different trail connections. But
Pushback on that was it, Jordan said his sense was they didn't
Yeah.
like that.
yeah, so that's interesting because I wonder what it'll be like round two and if we only captured a certain sentiment or if that was everybody's thoughts.
And I think with the Blue Lakes connection, had a lot to do with just the proximity to the neighborhood itself with that trail connection. This one, I think, had less of that kind of sentiment from the neighborhood. And I think to your point though, Nikki, there's this existing corridor that connects from the Quandary Peak Trail to back to McCullough Gulch Road. And you could provide that trail experience and say, put a counter out there and say, are people using this?
Yeah,
And that might justify extending the trail and being like, okay, let's get that last half mile off the road. And so use this kind of already existing corridor that's already fragmented piece of the landscape. And I think that would be a good way to write this into the plan, kind of like, here's a phased approach to implementing this type of trail connection.
Yeah, I actually really like that idea. That's the question is, I think in theory, it's fine. It's just if it will actually get used.
I think because that's your overall concern is disrupting and then there's no use.
Yeah.
Like we've done this and nobody's using it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Jordan, for that. Any comments, any more comments specifically to the master plan framework?
Well, I mean, just to reiterate that
Yeah.
it would be, I do feel a little bit more inclined for this one because the Wheeler Trail, defunct Wheeler Trail is most of this. So it would be a lot less work and a lot less rugged terrain. I am compelled, Alex, I was gonna say the same thing. I've been out on that road many times with locals for dog walks and there's, it's pretty well used as a local trail. And so I would have imagined that they would have wanted it. Just as a trail connection or just as a dog walking trail, honestly. But anyway, my point was that if the defunct Wheeler Trail is already there, it feels a little bit less burdensome than the Blue Lakes connection.
How well is it established, Jordan? Like, do you have a sense about that?
Wasn't there like a trail building on this like a long time ago? No, like
And I remember.
like I was a kid.
Thinking of is like a cross-country ski, almost like a 2-rut wide trail through the woods. It's pretty well established. There's a good corridor there, maybe not to current like trail building standards because this was a very different use when it was constructed, but the corridor is pretty well established from my experience.
It's actually on Cotrex, it's a old trail. It's a special color and it's actually marked on the app, the old trail corridor. So
Well, I know people use from McCullough, the road to Spruce Creek Road. I mean, that section is used. This just doesn't seem but yeah, that's good to hear.
So are we talking about going from Lower McCullough up to Wheeler turning left and then connecting? Because that's
No,
done right now.
This isn't Lower McCullough. This is connecting Quandary kind of up and over, like the ridge essentially from Quandary to McCullough on an old trail alignment.
Yeah.
That's when we're saying Wheeler. It's an old trail that connected from Hoosier all the way to like our ski area.
Tony's drawing it on his mouse. Right
Yeah, it would be, in general area here connecting. And then the existing Wheeler to Spruce Creek is this line right here. And Lower McCullough is at the bottom of the drainage.
And that's already
And that
So-
comes up
trail.
what I usually do.
Yep. And so we're looking at making a connection from over here, using the old Wheeler Trail and then connecting to McCullough Gulch in general. And then the larger concept, big picture, is to take the Wheeler Trail all the way to Hoosier Pass. So you could connect from Hoosier Pass to Mikasa.
Yes.
Copper?
Wheeler goes now.
Oh. Mikasa.
They sponsor that section of trail.
We'll adopt it.
The Casa Trail.
Can I ask Jeffrey a question? Jeffrey, don't you remember, I feel like when I was like young, we did a trail building day on an area that ended up not getting built. Like it was a trail building day and then we didn't do it. Does this ring a bell to you? Cause I think it's this section. Yeah.
Yeah, we used to bicycle the Wheeler from Mikasa to Macomb. Go up, area, trail.
Yeah. I think there was like an actual, I guess it doesn't matter. There was a trail building day and then and then we never ended up doing this. Yeah, so maybe I'm thinking of that area. Okay, anyway. doesn't matter. Thank you.
Cool. Well, let's move Spruce Creek Trailhead. I think this is a good opportunity for some comments here.
How the parking delineation works in the winter, if it's using the tubing.
This would be something
No.
that in my opinion would have to be seasonally like installed and removed, because in the winter it's just going to be plowed away, obviously. And I think that's another thing that's important to keep in mind here, is that not all these spaces would, no matter what the build out level was, would be available in the winter, because there's just not the plowing capacity up there. But yeah, delineation in the winter would not really exist as far as I'm concerned.
And I think that's interesting, because the user numbers were the highest in May. And so I was curious what the approach would be with that delineation in May specifically.
Yeah, Allison had a note in there. She thinks that something happened with the counter, that it got like tripped multiple times. But although I will say that 555 number was on the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, so it does seem to me like there's a chance that it was accurate. I think if the rest of the data speaks to that, we're not seeing that level of wintertime use typically, that we're seeing overflowing, but that those shoulder seasons are really difficult. And if you went past Quandary in this last spring, the backcountry skiing traffic was overflowing the parking lot. And so again, this is something that we have to kind of adapt to. And when we see these demands happening, maybe April and May goes to a free reservation system at Quandary, because we want to be able to know how many people are going to show up there on any given Saturday to ski. And I think a similar approach would have to be taken in this area as well. And I'm not sure what version of this drawing, and that looks to be the newest one, but there's something about this display is
Yeah.
very odd.
It's
But
techno.
the most recent iteration of this, I think, since the last time we spoke, and I think is important to notice, is that we did get a lot of feedback from our partners about potentially closing where that current parking area is and consolidating all the parking into the new parking zone, so that there's not like two trailheads for the Spruce Creek Trail. So when we're looking at this diagram now, we have, kind of different phases. One is building some new parking that's the lighter color around the outside. The second is closing, with that closing the current parking area, so reducing those spaces, and then having the potential to build out these 32 additional spaces within kind of the footprint of the new parking area. And I think that's one of the biggest changes, was just consolidating these to one location on the landscape. That allows us to put our shuttle turnaround and our restrooms and all of our signage just in one kind of centralized location. So I think that was the biggest update to this plan.
Would you close the parking there's those two lots way up? The one at the corner of like Crystal Creek and Spruce Creek, and then even farther up, would you close those parking areas?
I think that's something that the Forest Service should analyze potentially and go to the public to get more comment on. But that is not the intent at least initially. But obviously you have to, again, be adaptive and see, are people getting really clued into this? Can we manage the road in such a way that it is a limited types of vehicles that can access those, so they do become truly 4x4 limited access locations? And that's actually another reason to move the parking to the new location in this clear cut, is because it pulls users further down the road and they're not going to see those kind of areas where they're like, oh, what happens if I just keep going past this parking area? And so that was some of the other logic, I guess, that went into this most recent iteration. But to answer your question, no, that the intent is to leave those open until we see that they're like a major issue or causing real problems up there.
How does implementing a new shuttle route do anything for the experience of differently abled people?
Well, I thought maybe some of those folks might not have the right vehicles to be able to get up to that area, so it would provide them maybe an experience to get to that trailhead. But I think differently abled, I was trying to actually digest what differently abled in a broad scope meant as well.
Does it really mean necessarily people who we would used to call handicapped? I mean, a wheelchair isn't going up there.
No, correct. Yes. So that could be, amended or changed.
I wasn't sure what we were
Yeah.
getting at there.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, we were just talking a little bit about Francie's and just how that all factors in. I think there's enough voice in this one that the solution's gonna come to the front. I like what you're saying about using the parking further up and kind of getting rid of what already exists. I think we get the parking right on this one, this whole experience increases tenfold. Because right now it's a cluster no matter how you go about it. So this one, I'm not always a big fan of parking and programming, but this is one place where we have needed it for decades. But yeah, curious how we do the closures for Francie's and the additional use and some of the other needs up there. But I like this one.
Have we heard from the neighbors along Spruce Creek Road?
They were involved in a neighborhood meeting where we hosted them to kind of hear their concerns. It was a rather small audience. We sent out about 65 direct correspondence to the lots that were just within like a half mile buffer from Spruce Creek Road, and we had about 10 neighbors attend that meeting. So again, kind of low, but we did hear a lot about the traffic. I mean, I think that was the major concern, and I think that one of the reasons we put together that table of traffic numbers was to show that even with these expanded parking areas, when implementing a reservation system, you're going to be able to shave off those top ends of all those daily averages from the high season. And the most parking spaces that we're looking at here is like 110. If you put 20 of those towards overnight users like backpackers and hut users, you're down to 90 spaces. And the most you're realistically ever going to sell those spaces is going to be 1 to maybe 1.5 times per day. And so you're looking into like 90 to, this is at the high end, to 90 to 135. And if you look at those averages we were seeing on a daily basis during the high season, it's up and over 200. And those peak days are in the 4 to 500 range. And so one of my main goals here when we were doing the math about what should the capacity of the Spruce Creek trailhead be was how can we reduce those traffic numbers? Because I don't have good counts of how many people go up Spruce Creek and Crystal Lakes and Spruce Creek Road, because there are so many different routes you can take from this area that having a capacity number to work backwards off of, which is what we did for McCullough and Quandary, was impossible. Basically, we don't really have a good grasp on how many people are up there, but the goal here was really, okay, let's look at what the current levels of traffic are and see if we can't reduce that. And so that really is where these numbers came from, while also providing enough spaces that selling them for $5 to $10 per space would hopefully fund a shuttle service that would at least run on those highest demand days on the weekends, or maybe during just a few of the peak months. So that's kind of the way that we came to this level of recommendation.
So Jordan, and then the idea would be we would sign the road entirely no parking along the road, right?
That's correct. And this road is actually a Summit County easement on Forest Service from the edge of the town of Blue River all the way to that kind of upper Mohawk Lakes parking area. And so this would be county enforcement. And so we would need some buy-in from the sheriff's office. And the management framework, which we talked about last time a little bit, did outline having a community service officer full-time to work in this area, Spruce Creek, McCullough Gulch, Blue Lakes, to effectuate that enforcement along county right of way. So that's correct. There would be enforcement, either with physical barriers up the road past the current trailhead, and with a deputy enforcing our no parking regulations further down.
For what it's worth, I talked about this with Duke in a meeting, but we looked up on the assessor's site that Crown neighborhood, and it looked to be that about half those homes were people that were likely second homes where their addresses were elsewhere. So I'm not sure what we make of that, but I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we did expand the outreach for this most recent round to try to capture some more of the folks who do access their homes from Spruce Creek Road. So pretty much everything from the town line, Gold King unsub to the north, all the way to Spruce Creek Road and the Crown neighborhood is included, which is like 200 and some lots there. So yeah, just trying to increase that outreach and get some more feedback. But to your point, more than half of those addresses were not local addresses, so or out of state.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jordan.
Good on this one?
Okay, let's circle back. Well, how do you guys generally feel just about the master plan framework and the decision-making process we just went through?
Hi, Tony. I mean, going through it collectively helps, right? When you do it in your own bubble, it's a little more difficult. But yeah, like I said, I still wish we had some level of measurable a grading system that we can hand it off. A yes or no is one answer, but we're 80% in agreement of a plan would be better in my mind. And maybe that's just there's still some evolution that goes on with our master plan structure as far as how we go about all these processes. So it was more helpful to go at it with everybody at the table. So.
What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I think that it does seem more qualitative than quantitative as far as, giving it a grade. But, it does bring a lot of, different criteria to, bubbles it up so that you can have a conversation about whether it hits certain goals. To a certain extent, you can kind of wordsmith your way around some of those, but at least we're talking about them. And so, I'm comfortable with that at this point.
Yeah, I see where Chris is coming from for sure. And also, I don't know how we make this more quantitative than it already is, because I think we kind of had this discussion when we were doing the master plan too, that it's impossible to equally weight all of these questions or determine what is the most weighted. And so I've always been okay with the qualitative approach because I think it gets us to have this conversation, and when we make recommendations to council, I think that we're going through this criteria process and we can create the caveats that we want, saying we approve this and the things that we consider the most were, whether X, Y, and Z actually is going to happen. And so I think that it's like a summary response instead of a yes or no sometimes. Because I think having that description of yes, but, or no, but we'd be okay if this changed, is the only approach that the master plan is going to be able to achieve. So I think this was really helpful, and thank you so much for staff putting this all together side by side, because I'm sure it was a lot of work and it helped me a lot. I think it's also hard because we didn't really have parking lots in mind when we did the master plan.
Yeah.
So it's like almost a good fit. At first I was like, how are we doing this plan with this? But I think it ended up still asking a lot of the right questions, so.
I think we need to really work more with the master plan process itself, because there's so many things, there are so many things that are scattered throughout the document that seem to be prescriptive about how you analyze. And it's not consolidated at the end or at the beginning that this is the flow chart. You go here and then you go here and then you go here. It's not like that. It's written in different paragraphs throughout with different objectives. And I think we really need to get into the meat of this thing and try and pull out either what we think is appropriate for a particular decision point, or how can we use the bulk of what the master plan is supposed to be doing for us, which is creating a decision framework. So I think we have some learning to do as we go through this process. And the only way we'll learn it is if we go through the process. So a really good exercise, as painful as it probably is for you to put together.
We're all in it together here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're making it work. Yeah, and that's that's the overall goal, is we want it to work for us and
Right.
have a consistent framework that we feel good about.
Mhm.
Or maybe we don't, but at least we had a good conversation about
We
it,
had a good time.
right? Yeah.
Your point, our master plan is intended to be a living document. It's also intended not to be so rigid that we're bound to anything specific, but maybe it's like really looking at how to organize it better.
Right.
I think you make great points. But yeah, maybe, I don't know what the next step would be. That'd probably be a staff determination, but.
Yeah, because Bobby, I was agreeing, like looking at, and I think, again, I feel like it's a little deja vu, because I feel like we had this when we were trying to finalize the master plan, where it's like, there's these design guidelines, and then there's these trail development guidelines, but the design guidelines are also about trails. And so it's like, why do we have both of those sections? And to Bobby's point, the habitat was coming from the design, and I think there's a way to kind of streamline those two sections, because I
then
think they're
there's-
duplicative.
Yeah, and then there's the acquisition guidelines
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Which,
And I think those can still be, like, maybe we can align them more to have the similar questions sound exactly the same or something, and be like, yeah, we consider this question in both acquisition and in trails. But when we have trail design guidelines and then trail development guidelines, I never really understood what the difference was. And then Bobby pointed it out that there's like a couple on that chart that are from both. So why do we have both? Yeah, so.
Something that we could, as we work with this plan more, revise the plan to, maybe even an appendix that has a flow chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be the easiest approach in terms of how we revise it.
Mhm.
And maybe it's just giving it a little time and space to use it and, and kind of stress testing it a
For
few
sure.
times over. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think, as we move forward, part of this is our trails plan and our signage plan. So maybe that's all incorporated within this decision-making framework is inside this trails plan too as well, or something like that. But
I think just to echo what people have said, it was a little unorthodox to use it in this, in analyzing this, but I think we can't let perfect get in the way of good, and it provided a lot of good framework for this discussion. I would say what I think it's missing in this current conversation is I don't think we had a good way to analyze the holistic project, like, because these were siloed, we were scrutinizing them individually or critically examining them that way, but not how are we thinking about the project as a whole? And that's where that, like, maybe the connectivity issues would have been flushed out more. That would be my only takeaway on that. Oh, and I guess I think this felt more difficult because it's multi-jurisdictional, which I don't think we'll run into not nearly as many partners as this project is. And also the management piece is enormous, like it has its own plan. That's how big it is. So we obviously can't tackle that very efficiently here, but yeah, otherwise I thought it was a good framework.
It just chiming in also, it was interesting to think about, we're looking at these, trying to break it down into manageable parts. So we go by trailhead and that makes sense, but then it's hard to keep sight of the big picture. And then we think about, oh, well, what about the Wheeler Trail from town to Hoosier Pass? And it's like, seeing that scope, when we're looking at McCullough Trailhead, for example, it's really hard to zoom in and zoom out,
Yeah.
at the same time. Yeah.
And also we're doing this adaptive process for NEPA, which is
Right.
its own level of complexity. So it's like trying to capture everything. So yeah.
Keep it in the process, even though we don't want that trail.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So I think it, provided.
Doing the best we can.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, what else would we have used? It just would have been, just wild and crazy.
Mhm.
No organization.
Well, it is good to hear, like the stress test idea, like, okay, this was valuable and let's keep building on this till we get somewhere where we really like it and we can be comfortable using it, repeatedly and passing it on to the next commissioners.
Mhm. Should we answer question 2? Jay, you kind of answered, you did both. Do you
Yeah,
want
and-
anything more on that one?
Just adding to that is, really hope that we do outreach to all the user groups, Summit Huts, the sheriff's department, as far as what they see as the issues, especially regarding like Spruce Creek Road. Obviously the neighbors feel like it's busy, but is that because of speeding? Is that because it's just a dirt road? And just try to hit all the people that have contact with those to see if we can, to check to make sure we are attacking the correct issues and not making assumptions that a larger parking lot will fix some of the other issues when maybe it's not.
How do you feel about that one, Kristen?
Yep, I think the current version is good. I think that when this gets presented, I think framing it in a way that's like, this is what's already happened, this is what the management plan already has, this is why this has been put together, I think will be really important. So it's not just, this is BOSAC's recommendation, but to your point, a lot of data went into why these parking lots look the way they do and why some stakeholders think these connections are important and that we can leave them in the process for now, but that it doesn't mean that these are set in stone. So I think kind of making sure that council has the full picture when it's presented, I think will be important, but otherwise I do agree.
I should have said this at the outset of question number 2, but I did have a conversation with Kelly, our mayor, and she said in terms of feedback from BOSAC to council, which Jay, I know you provide a lot of, which is great, but she said she likes understanding or getting a sense of the character of the conversation, not only from the firm recommendation, but maybe things we got hung up on and so forth. So
I think
I
that was,
should've-
yeah,
yeah, like
that was
to
my
your
point about the
point.
master plan.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But if Jay, if you had anything else on that, like if there's anything you would add to, yes, we approve or recommend the access plan, but if there's any caveats you would want to.
Oh, I'm always happy to provide color to
Okay. Got it. Great. Okay. For Duke too, I guess it's multi-pronged, but yes. What about you, Chris?
I'd be in support of it as it stands right now. Obviously, the devil will be in the details and there's a lot more to do on this, but there's so many valuable eyes on this project already that I think that our feedback is important, but it probably isn't the top level expert insights that are going into this project. So yeah, I'd be in support of all the work that's been done so far and where it's at.
And me too. I think that between the Volpe Center and the various partners that got together and really hashed this out, that there's been a lot of research done. And so, yeah, I'm okay with what we have here. I don't know that that's what we'll end up with ultimately, but I think it's a good starting point.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I think characterizing the conversation that we really scrutinize, like, I think Mark said it well, like understanding the big picture of Volt-based center intention of like how broadly they're building it out and what the rationale is behind that is interesting. I'd also be curious if council is gonna look at the management piece as well. Do we know if how interested they are in that document? The one we looked at last.
Right, the
month?
management framework.
Management framework.
Jordan, feel free to chime in. Go ahead,
I
Jordan.
mean, I think the level of feedback that we're looking for on that is, are we comfortable recommending the special use permit as a potential way to manage this zone in the future? We don't, again, not committing ourselves to anything, but I think from the highest level, it would be good to hear from town council, like, we absolutely want nothing to do with a special use permit in this area. If the county feels like they potentially would take that on, great, but we don't really want to do with it, or maybe we could talk about partnering. I think that's the kind of level that Sam has indicated Sam Asman from the Forest Service, that they need going into NEPA, just being like, here are the options that we would like to be able to potentially use in the future. So I think keeping this very high level, and I'll leave it to your staff to bring that to them, but looking at kind of here are those three, the Recreation Enhancement Act, a concessionaire, a special use permit, would we want to throw any of those out as no, we absolutely don't want to see a concessionaire running this, or no, we absolutely don't want anything to do with a special use permit. I think that's the kind of level of feedback that we'd be looking for from the electeds, and that's what we'll be doing when we bring this to BOCC as well. Just saying, these are our three mechanisms that we have, and are you comfortable at least exploring the possibility of using them, or is any of these right out in your brain? So
Great.
I think for this standpoint, we were just hoping to break it down into a couple plans, and then we can bring back the management plan at some point if you guys want to make that recommendation to of what those three options are. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I kind of think though, we want to talk to council about this and get that level, is council comfortable charging a fee for use of these areas? And if so, are they comfortable with all three of these these options, special use permit, concessionaires, and recreation enhancement, or maybe just two? And then it's this action plan recommendations that they really need to dig their teeth into, make sure they're okay with that before it gets to NEPA. And then through NEPA, then that can be, we can decide later and see what comes out of NEPA and what comes out of more public comment, like what makes the most sense in terms of management approaches.
When will council look at the access plan?
Well, we tentatively were on the schedule for March 11th. So there's going to be kind of that was dependent on how this went, you know, if we had this discussion, we're like, well, we want to really look at this a lot more and change this and that, then maybe we'd push that back. But I'd say now, we're still on target for March 11th.
Okay. Great. You good on that one? Duke, do you have what you need?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That was a good
Okay.
discussion.
You.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thank
Glad you were here.
Yeah.
All right, other matters related to open space. Anyone have one of those?
I just had a quick one, and I wish she was still here, but Julia, some of you know, has taken a promotion in town. She's now assistant town manager. And so she will, I'm sure we'll be seeing her, but she won't be directly involved in the day-to-day management with the open space and trails program anymore. And just a shout out to all her great guidance over the last few months, last year, essentially working with the staff. So anyway, if you get a chance to see her, congratulate her.
Thanks, Mark. Will you be hiring a new assistant?
Yeah, we're recruiting right now.
Okay. So will that new person be our new compadre here at BOSAC?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Along with me, you're not getting rid of me.
Yeah, okay. Take a new friend. Okay. Jay, council matters.
There was really, excuse me, there was really only one thing that pertained to open space, and that was the Cucumber Creek vesting plan. Tim Casey came to us saying, hey, my vesting on the 3 acres of up at Cucumber Creek are expiring in January. We can go ahead and plat those, but if we plat them, then we're gonna sell it to a developer to build. And currently the Nordic Center utilizes it in the winter. It's some really good temporary open space that is leased to the Nordic Center and they get to enjoy. And so we approved a 5-year additional vesting period for them. Whether they use all of it, they actually were only asking for 3, but we gave them 5, saying, take your time in developing this. It doesn't have to happen overnight. And then in addition to that, staff is working with Tim to get a first right of offer on that land, the 3 acres to the town. Probably a long shot that we'd be able to justify that cost, but at least we'll have that option, when it comes to. But other than that, that's about it. Happy to accept any questions, anything else. So.
Questions? Thank you, Councilman.
Yeah.
I'll be presenting to council the state of the open space next week, and then also proposal to renew the Little Daisy lease and extend the terms to 5 years.
Is that everything? We did it. Okay, I move to adjourn. Second, we did it.
Right.
Is that a